Hi, I'm David Huboi. You're watching Going Green TV. And this program is sponsored by the San Benito County Chamber of Commerce. And as part of the Green Committee, our message is economic vitality along with environmental sustainability for future generations. And on the set today, we have Aaron Johnson from L&G Attorneys. We're going to talk about cannabis and the environment. Aaron, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
It's good to have you here. And it's been on the agenda for a long time with the Green Committee. And Aaron, as I say, is part of the L&G, a partner of L&G Attorneys.
Right.
And I understand you went to Fresno State.
I did.
I'm not going to hold that against you, right?
Go Dog.
Fresno State Bulldog. Okay. Well, can you give us a little history about your personal involvement with L&G and as an attorney and some of the associations that you're with?
Exactly. Well, I did go to Fresno State. I was a viticulture slash plant science major. I changed that late in the game and got a degree in speech communication, and then went into law school in order to represent clients in viticulture, in agriculture. I come from an agriculture family in the Salinas Valley, and so I was very interested in regulation and the regulatory process and how it affects business as well as how it interacts with the environment.
Mm-hmm. And I understand that. How did you get involved in the legal issues with cannabis?
Well, to make a very long story short, I think it really comes from my research a couple of years ago, or close to a couple of years ago. I had about 6 years ago, to step back for a second, I broke my neck playing baseball. I was going back in left field and dove basically to get a ball that was going over my head, and put me into a horizontal position, and I hit the wall, breaking my neck. So I had what's called ACDF surgery, fusion surgery with a cadaver bone and titanium plate, screws, etc. in my neck. So with that, I spent close to 5 years taking hydrocodone, Valium, Vicodin to deal with the pain and also deal with the muscle spasms that are associated with having hardware in your neck. And as a result of that, I was really concerned about what that was doing to my liver. I was not taking an incredible amount of it, like some of the stories that you hear where you're taking 15 to 30 pills a day. I was taking what was prescribed, and half of that, half a pill every 4 hours to manage the pain. And it just got to the point where I could feel my body being depleted. It was a chemical reaction, and I really didn't like that. And so I started doing research. I think it was actually it was Sanjay Gupta's special on CNN, Weed, and since then he's done 2 other episodes of that, little documentaries, and it shed light on the plant for me. And what I learned was that the plant contains a lot of components to it that match up well with our systems. And so the plant has cannabinoids, many of them. They've got over, the marijuana plant has over 100 different cannabinoids. THC and CBD are 2 of those. THC being the chemical component in the plant that you feel that makes you either, gives you the psychoactive effect in the brain, that gives you that either euphoric sense or whatever. But then there's the cannabinoid, cannabidiol, which is the CBD, that has relatively no effect in your brain, but what it does is it relaxes your muscles, and it deals with pain management. Mm-hmm. And so I never had realized that the plant carried this other component in it that, if isolated or boosted through hybridization, you could elicit a different or better response if that's what you were looking for in the plant. Mm-hmm. You're looking.
Now, would that be taken orally to get those benefits, or could you get it smoking, or is it both? Or?
You can take it orally. You can take it. There are several different ways. You can take it through basically an oil or alcohol-based form in a tincture, you know, like a droplet. You put it under your tongue. You can obviously smoke it in the traditional flower sense. They are doing a lot of concentrates and extractions that result in edibles. And so what they do is they take the plant and they run it through a process that results in just they pull off what's called the trichomes and parts of the plant that contain the oily substance that contains the chemical, you know, the THC or the CBD in it. And they concentrate that into a smaller, you know, concentrated amount. They take that amount and they can either infuse that into different products like butter, other oil-based.
You can cook with the butter anything you want.
Right,
Yeah? Wow.
exactly. It interacts well with an oil because it's a lipid. And so
that helped with your pain management then. You're able to not have to take the Vicodin and all those synthetic drugs that are bad for your liver after
Right.
you got into that
Exactly.
aspect. Okay.
So actually what I did with that was, with that information, I went and got a medical card, and then I started taking a higher CBD. So through hybridization, you can get a higher cannabinoid versus THC, you know, CBD to THC ratio. So because they haven't done a lot of research as far as doctors prescribing this, I had to do my own research on myself to see what works.
I was going to say, because do they, like at the dispensaries or whatever, do they label the THC content?
They do.
They do. Oh.
Yeah, that's part of the testing. The industry over the last several years has come a long way. They do test. All of the dispensaries that I'm aware of will test the product as it comes in, and they'll also test it while it's in the facility before it goes out. And so
Most of these dispensaries, when you go in, can they assist you and say, hey, I got pain, or I have sleep issues, or this, and they can recommend
yes,
what type of marijuana to use for that ailment?
yeah. In fact, my observation is, so that if you walk into a dispensary, what you have in front of you is what's called a bud tender. They are the people that will deliver medicine,
Right.
and instead of a pharmacist, that's what they are effectively. And so they're the ones that are closest to the patient. They're closer to the patient than the doctor even. I mean, as far as daily, not daily interaction, but significant interaction. You may see the doctor once a year, or a couple times a year if needed, but you will see a bud tender based on what you need in medicine.
So they're like your pharmacist, basically.
Right.
That type of
You
thing.
explain what why you are there, why you have the recommendation. The bud tender looks it over, tries to understand you as a person, and so they will show you, here's a CBD to THC ratio of 10 milligrams to 5. And they do break it down as
Wow,
if it's
that's interesting.
to show you what you
And then they'll
have.
keep a record of it, so if you come back, you can say, hey, that didn't work, I need
Right.
an adjustment.
Exactly.
Oh, wow.
Okay. So when we talk about cannabis, let's define cannabis for the viewers that never heard that term before. How would you define that?
A cannabis would be one that a business. It's a legally formed business. I think that's more of a trade name or something that we've given our clients as far as that goes. It's a business that conducts, its operations in the cannabis arena. They can be either a dispensary, a grower. They can be in the concentrates manufacturing process. They can also be in the transportation, mobile delivery process as well. And what they can also actually, when I talk with clients and others in the business, there are ancillary services that are brought into this as well. Lighting for growers, hydroponic type of environments, those kind of areas I would include under the cannabis umbrella.
Okay. And can you clarify your role then as an attorney in the cannabis industry?
Yes. So what I normally do as a client comes in, if they are, if they're a grower or they're a dispensary, I will explain to them that, you know, anybody who has possession of the plant in basically any form needs to have a medical card. And if they have in their possession more than what's entitled to them, which is 8 ounces or 8 ounces or 6 plants, you know, if it's growing on your property, you have a right to grow 6 mature plants at a time. And so if you've got that on, you know, if you exceed that, then what you want to do is you know, you engage in a collective of people, a cooperative or a collective, and the collection of people basically allows one who wants to grow for the group to grow. And they're entitled to grow as many plants as you have patients times 6. So if the 3 of us had 6, you know, had a right to 6 plants, I could grow 18 for us. And so that's kind of the
Interesting.
the
That's
concept
a lot of
there.
pot, no? I mean,
Yeah.
how much does a plant yield?
Plant yields between, you know, 1.5 to sometimes you know, 3 or 4 pounds.
Quite a bit.
Can you identify the legal issues relevant to cannabis business, and where do you think we are in regard to legalization?
Well, it's a timely question. As we speak, this is September 11th, and the legislature is doing their work. They're in session on a bill called AB 266, and we received news late last night that a deal had been struck between the governor, the Senate, and the Assembly. And AB 266 is supposed to provide the regulatory framework that regulates medical cannabis. This is a long time in the making. It was originally approved by the voters in Prop 215 back in 1997, and so now we're at a point where the Compassionate Use Act, which is what that is called, is finally, after it was enacted in '97, is actually, you know, here and finally, hopefully, we'll hear today that it's being regulated.
And so how does that relate then to the federal government? Because I know there's a dichotomy with the federal regulations having it prohibited in the state now that it is a permitted use on a statewide basis for medicinal marijuana. So does that mean that the federal government is going to say, okay, you have this statewide bill that's passed, that we're going to have a hands-off policy?
They have been mandated, the federal government has been mandated by Congress to not spend federal funds on prosecuting medical marijuana cases in a state that has regulated that. They've been mandated by Congress to not interfere with a regulatory kind of structure. So even though the bill that passes today may have some pretty onerous provisions and may not be the best thing for the patients and may not be the best thing for those in the business, but what it will provide is the ability for those that are operating in it to have some safety in their operations, that the federal government is not coming in for the purpose of taking them out when they're doing a lawful business.
Okay.
Interesting. Do you think we're headed towards recreational use as well? Like, what is it, Washington, Oregon, Washington, D.C., Colorado? All have recreational?
Right. So right now we've got 23 states that have enacted medical marijuana legalization policies. Of those states, and 4 of those have been approved as recreational or adult use, and so that's where they are at the moment. And I'm sorry, what was that question?
No, I was just curious. Like, you know, how's that led to, you know, the formation of laws in those states? I know it's another host of problems, probably, you know, like driving under the influence and, you know, things like that. I mean, how have they dealt with those things? Because I know it was a concern, and I have some friends that live up in Washington, and even though they passed the law, I don't even know if it's in practice now, because they had to figure out all those details. You know, how are they going to handle, you know, under the influence, people under 18, you know, things
Right.
like, you know, any controlled substance.
Right. Well, first, we are headed towards legalization. That's what the polling indicates. In fact, you know, I've done some research on what we did as a, for medical marijuana, each county in our immediate area, San Benito, Santa Cruz, and Monterey County, passed at least by 57% in each county medical marijuana.
And that was years ago, right?
That was years ago, 20 years ago.
Opinions totally changed.
Opinions in the last 18 months have significantly changed. There has been this snowball effect almost in terms of where the society is going with this issue. They're realizing that the stigma that was attached to cannabis back in the 1930s just doesn't exist, today, as far as it being a psychoactive drug that makes people go on a rampage, as was
Reefer madness.
Yeah, reefer. Yeah.
Exactly.
We all saw that in high school.
Right.
They go crazy and do crazy things.
But the other 4 states that have implemented recreational use, of those, Washington is recreational and ongoing. So is Colorado. Oregon is in the process of, they have approved their law, and they're in a period where they're ramping up their regulatory process, and I believe they go fully legal January 1 of next year.
So they passed it last November, and it'll be January 2006 when it's actually implemented.
Yeah, 2016, or it may even be 2017. I don't want to speak out of tune, but the whole concept and what we expect to see out of AB 266 locally is, or at least statewide, is that they take some time, they being the legislators, to enact the framework, and then they set up a department, and then the department works on the regulations, and they take a year or 2 to get those into effect, and then the system's in place.
Yeah, it takes a while. So let's talk about cannabis in relation to revenue, job creation, and crime. I know, and in terms of, let's talk about the revenue, I know I did some research. We have what's called the Emerald Triangle that's composed of Humboldt, Mendocino, and Trinity counties. And my research indicates that last year, according to some estimates, Humboldt County's crops alone brought in $415 million.
Wow.
And I think that the state of California provides over 50% of the national marijuana use.
Right.
Would you say that? So, but what about, so can you say, what about the crime aspect and job creation? What do you think of the potential, I guess, when marijuana would be legal? What would you say about that?
Well, it's undeniable that it is a job creator. I was recently in a dispensary in San Jose, actually getting a tour, and in that facility, which is, it's kind of a typical business park type of setting. In the facility, they have an area for the dispensary itself, but they also have a small grow in the back of it, kind of a warehouse type of setting, all enclosed indoor facility. They have a room that is dedicated to vending, so they bring in, growers will come in, they'll do initial testing to take the product in, etc. Then they'll do sorting. They account for every bit of flower that comes in to the dispensary. They account for it from the start all the way through the sale.
Do they do the testing too?
Right. Well,
You gonna apply for a job? Well, I find it interesting, especially in the Emerald Triangle, because this whole marijuana business came about at a perfect time for that area, because the fishing industry and the forestry industry were losing jobs by the thousands up there, and that was the main industry up there. And I've noticed a rebound in the economy up there, just on my visits up there.
Right.
And that's the only thing I can attribute it to, because nothing replaced those fishing or forestry jobs except marijuana that I'm aware of. Yeah.
well, in the dispensary that I'm talking about, the end result there, I asked the owners how many people are working here, because I had seen quite a few, just the initial room when you walk in. And different components of this operation, and he said there were 74 people under that roof working at that time.
There's a lot of specialized tasks involved
Right.
in cannabis business, from the manufacturing, the cultivation, to the dispensary, and the distribution. That's so. I guess in terms of the crime aspect, there's a lot of illegal marijuana cultivation. We're going to get into the environmental consequences of that. would you say if marijuana is legal in the future, do you think crime will then, what do you think about the crime aspect? And I know this is kind of a nebulous term because, you know, what crime are we talking about? But do you have any feeling, would the crime decrease in a certain way or increase? Or what's your
I
feeling
believe
about
it will
that?
decrease.
Decrease,
What we've seen, and I have read reports, you know, since we have gone through medical legalization and states have enacted, you know, certain laws like Colorado's, we have seen a decrease in the amount of money that goes to the cartels. And that's really a major issue.
I know
So-
Governor Brown had a different take on that, and I couldn't quite understand his take that he thought crime would increase if marijuana was legal. I still don't get the nexus of
No,
that.
I don't get that either.
Don't quite understand it.
But I mean, you know, you look at prohibition and, you know, the crime that was happening when alcohol was illegal and how it precipitously went down once it was legalized again. So
Yeah,
I
it
think
seems
there's
to me
some
that-
ties there. And,
Right.
you know, and I know there's some movements to make all drugs legal, and you kind of wonder maybe, you know, treat it as a health problem rather than as a crime.
Now, speaking of health, you know, we have this, as Aaron mentioned, in the 30s, you know, the reefer madness, and it's going to be an addicting. You'll get hooked on it. You'll go on to harder drugs, and we've heard about marijuana use with short-term memory loss and marijuana use maybe with physical body impairment. But we do know now that there have been studies that marijuana has some benefits to and health benefits like easing nausea, and is good for if you have glaucoma, increases the appetite. I think we all would agree to that.
Munchies.
Right, give you the munchies. Right. So I think that a part of the, in my view, part of the stumbling block with legalization is the myths associated with marijuana. Would you say that is true? You know, with marijuana being this really a dark, you know, evil thing to get involved with. But now I think studies are showing that it is.
Well, part of that isn't that
certainly
because
has
it's
some
on the
health
Schedule
benefits.
1 for the drug, any drugs on Schedule 1, they can't fund research and,
Right.
and stuff. And,
Yeah, I
and
think-
isn't there a movement to get it off of Schedule 1?
Yes, there's a bill pending now. I believe it's hung up in the Judiciary Committee in either the Senate or Congress in Washington, D.C., called the CARES Act. It looks like it'll be a 2-year bill, largely because the chair of the Judiciary Committee is staunchly against it and is not putting it on the agenda to hear it. But outside of that, that bill would take the initial step of taking it off Schedule 1. So what Schedule 1 says is that the cannabis plant has no medical value and is, you know, I'm paraphrasing, but damaging to, you know, person's health.
And some of those other drugs are like heroin that are on there, right?
Right.
Like really,
Cocaine is listed Schedule 2.
really horrible drugs. So, you know,
They're-
it's just
Schedule 1, cocaine and heroin are not even on Schedule 1.
really.
They're at a lower level because they have some medicinal value. Cocaine has a numbing effect. That's why, as a local anesthetic, that's what it was used for. And it remains as a Schedule 2 controlled substance today.
The famous story of Coca-Cola getting its name because it
Right.
originally had cocaine in it.
But the
Right.
problem with it being listed as Schedule 1 has resulted in the inability of us to, despite the fact that we now know that there is medical value, we don't have the ability to fund research to get that done. So the research that's been happening over the last several years has actually been taking place in Israel and other places outside of the
I
United
see.
States. There's been
Yeah.
a little bit of research
Because
locally.
you get this contradictory research, I guess, and it's really not established, or maybe I'm wrong, but some say that marijuana is pretty much, as you were saying, the THC aspect is kind of just a stress reducer more than anything else. I mean, able to calm down and relax, and a lot of professionals use marijuana, you know, maybe on the weekend to relax. But let's get this.
But the medical benefit, if I can just interject real quickly on that, the medical benefits are far greater than what that we understand right now from a scientific standpoint.
Okay.
What we have found, even through mice and through other preliminary tests, is that particularly the CBD that I mentioned before, the cannabidiol, that has appeared to reduce size of tumors. I mean, there is research coming out that is very significant. So, for those that have cancer patients, or in their family, who have done research, they are running across this now, and they're using this. I actually have a friend in the Salinas Valley who started taking. He's had stage 4 cancer. He started taking cannabidiol, CBD, and THC because he needed to facilitate, deal with hunger and make sure he could not keep anything down. And since then, he's gained weight. His levels, white blood count has increased, and he's fighting it. And so, I'm not saying that it's the end-all, be-all, but there are indications that this has significant health benefits.
I guess then I would be correct to say that the connotation of marijuana from the 1930s, with the studies that are present studies that we know about, the connotation has changed from this nebulous, nefarious drug to something that could be a health benefit. And I think that's probably the reason why you're seeing a lot more people voting for medicinal marijuana, which I think that would be correct.
And I also think our generation, especially, you're seeing people, people that have used pot and been around it, so you've seen for yourself firsthand how people react on marijuana. I remember the first big concert I went to, the drunks were all fighting on one side, and the stoners were all like, "Hey, come on over, man, sit down."
Well, I think
Guess who felt better the next day?
I'm sure.
Okay, now let's talk about the environment.
Yeah.
The environmental consequences of illegal marijuana cultivation. I know that some farmers follow environmental regulation, but since California still has, it's been murky, and the federal government, it's still illegal under the federal law that there is prevalent illegal farming done, some by Mexican drug cartels, that disregard the environment completely. And illegal farms in California are, according to some estimates, the largest source of domestically grown weed in the United States, but the traffickers create an unnatural trail system. And they cut large section of trees. They'll bulldoze hilltops, creating a threat of landslides. They'll dam streams and creeks, which are, that's so precious for like the coho salmon up there in Northern California. And then the marijuana, because marijuana, as we know, requires quite a bit of water to grow. And they'll set out rat poison and pesticides and trash dumps and human latrines next to water sources. A scientist from UC Davis by the name of Murad Gabriel tested 58 endangered fishers. They're like weasels, and found that 80% had been exposed to rat poison from being near illegal marijuana cultivation sites. And then in 2011, a game warden found a black bear and her cubs convalescing on the ground after eating a stash of pesticides. And then also there's been 2 threatened spotted owls tested positive for rodenticides, as well as gray foxes, raccoons, and other carnivores. So
this directly related to the grow operation?
It's for illegal marijuana cultivation. I think that there's been a significant amount of environmental consequence because of this illegal operation. So how do you think this could change for the better once marijuana is legalized?
Well, by doing nothing,
Or if it will.
our local legislators are doing nothing about the problem. I mean, if they don't address it and legalize it, allow legal operations that are accountable, that follow the rules like everybody else does in agriculture, if that doesn't happen, we are assuring that activity will continue. So I encourage our local politicians and our local policymakers and our national policymakers to make decisions that bring these kind of rogue growers out of the mountains and into better environments for dealing with these issues. I mean, it's an agricultural product. It needs to be treated as any other agriculture product in California with regard to pesticide use, with regard to water use. You have to have a right to that water, and you have to there are certain issues with that that's a shared resource, and so those issues definitely need to be, by legalizing it and bringing it under a regulated system. Yes, those growers will have to pay into that system, but that money goes towards monitoring some of these other areas that are clearly doing environmental damage, and they should be out of business, in my opinion.
Okay, we're running out of time here, but is there any closing statement you want to give the viewers?
No, I think the policy is changing. I'd like to see legalization for medical use, such that these legal businesses are allowed to grow. They're allowed to grow. They're allowed to process. They're allowed to distribute in a legal system to the patients that need it. That's what I am promoting, and that's what I'd like to see happen.
Well, Aaron, I really want to thank you for coming on with us today and joining us on Going Green.
I appreciate you clarifying a lot of this stuff,
and-
because you only get snippets in the paper, and you've been a big help. So thank you.
Right.
We touched a very small portion
Very
of what's
small
going
part.
on.
May get you
I'm
back
sure.
on. We can talk some more about this subject,
Please
I'm
do.
sure. Okay, thanks again.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Take care.
Thanks, Aaron.
Thanks.
All right.
Hey, you're back watching Going Green, and my co-host, Shawn Novak, I didn't introduce him at the beginning. Sorry about that, Shawn, but
That's
I think
all right.
everybody knows who Shawn is.
I'm used to it, David.
And if you really know who Shawn is, I'm still discovering part of Shawn, because he went to this event called Burning Man, right? Shawn?
Right. Yeah.
Can you tell the viewers what Burning Man is?
I don't know if I can explain it, but basically what it is 65,000 people go out to the desert about 2 hours northeast of Reno, and they build a city out there, complete with a power grid, a water distribution system. They have a trash system. There's 2 newspapers that publish every day for the 2 weeks the festival is going on. So it's a big festival. They also have radio stations up there. It's like a whole, 65,000 people. And the way they set it up is they have these huge art displays out there, from 30 to 100 feet high that spit out flames and all kinds of crazy stuff, And then the rest of the people set up camps. Some people set up themed camps. And to give you an idea, my first day there, I've never really had an interest before, and a friend of mine got me a free ticket and said, you need to come to this. And I said, well, I'll try anything once. So I went up there, and my first day there, I go around the corner, and there's this place called the Lovin' Hut. So I'm like, check
Did
this
you fit in there?
I was surprised. I thought it was going to be mainly people in their 20s, but I saw people from 20s to 70s up there. And I would say the medium age is probably 35.
Really?
So it's a little older group than I thought it would be. But, I met people from Iceland, from Nicaragua, from Israel, all over the world.
You enjoyed yourself.
I didn't. Well, it was fascinating.
It's called a happening then?
And happening. But there's a lot of beautiful
Okay.
art. But, for being a water conservation guy, I found it interesting. 65,000 people up there, they were living on about 2 gallons of water a day, just for their personal needs. There's like no showers, porta potties. And here in Hollister, we average about 150 gallons per person per day. So seeing these people live on the water like that, it was really amazing. And water became so precious to these people. It really, to me, it did my heart good, because I don't think it gets the respect that it does. But out in this environment, water was king.
Okay.
So anyway, it was really interesting. And you talked about the marijuana environment. Up there, that's the federal lands where this is. So people were doing all kinds of drugs, but they were scared to use marijuana because you could smell it, and the federal rangers would get down on the people. So here they're
see.
doing like cocaine and things
Yeah.
like that, alcohol, but marijuana, they had to keep it on the down low, as
They
I
left
say.
their stashes at home.
And I met a lot of people. I guess the harvest is beginning in California for marijuana. And I met 3 people that after Burning Man, they were going out to the Emerald Triangle, and they're trimming marijuana. $200 a pound is what they're making, and they figure they could do a pound a day. So that's a lot of money. So it is part of it.
All right.
But anyway, I just
Thank
wanted to
you,
give you a
Shawn.
quick
Okay.
synopsis of that.
Okay, I want to close by saying that 14 years ago, 3,977 Americans perished by a brutal act of senseless terrorism. From the ashes and grief emerged a communal feeling of national pride mixed with anger. May we never forget, but let there be hope. And I leave you with 2 inspirational quotes for us to continue our cause of freedom and humanity. This one is by Washington Irving. There is a sacredness in tears. They are not the mark of weakness, but of power. They speak more eloquently than 10,000 tongues. They are messengers of overwhelming grief and unspeakable love. And this one is from Charles Dickens. In the destroyer's steps, there spring up bright creations that defy his power, and his dark path becomes a way of light to heaven. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time on Going Green.
Here, David.